All right, and we're on. Introducing Warren Weiss, Managing Partner at WestWave Capital. How are you, mate?
Good. Nice to see you, Joe. Thanks for having me on today.
Nice, good to see you, mate. How you been? What you been up to?
Oh, good. Just here in sunny California, we finally had some rain after, about 6 or 7 months of no rain, our typical dry season. So we're moving into the late fall here.
Yeah, nice. Where in California are you?
I live in a little town called Woodside, California, which is halfway between San Francisco and San Jose, just west of Stanford University.
Lovely. Yeah, nice, nice. Well, look, I know your real name is Warren, but everyone calls you Bunny, so I'll go by Bunny because that's how I know you. But yeah, Bunny, look,
Yeah.
with all my guests, I love to sort of go right back to where it all began and how you got into the industry.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks. I'll share a little bit of my history and story. I grew up in the Midwest in Chicago, Illinois, and my childhood was there all the way through my university environment. Just kind of going the way back machine. I majored in criminology at a small university called Western Illinois University with kind of the dream of being in the FBI. And during that process, kind of during between my junior and senior year, I was an undercover officer at the Houston Police Department, believe it or not. Kind of before 21 Jump Street, I was in a high school undercover looking for people that were selling drugs, and had quite the experience over that year, and was on a track to go into the FBI. Was accepted, and really in those days you had to be a lawyer, an accountant, a military police officer to get in. And through that, I learned a lot about what I wanted to do with myself and my life, and found out there are lots of long stories I won't share today, but it wasn't the track that I was destined to be on. A friend of mine called and said that he had invented the first voice response system to stop people from writing bad checks. I realize that goes, it's almost like talking about black and white TV and things like that. In those days, credit cards were just coming on board, and check fraud was really bad. And he said, well, you study criminology, so you must know a lot about this stuff. And I go, no, I don't know anything about it. So he hired me to run sales. We took the company public, and then later in about a year and a half after being in charge of sales, which I also knew nothing about. This was before the software industry was really invented, but it was quite the technology, and we sold it to Equifax in Atlanta. That's really where I got my first break to go into the technology business. There was a company called Management Science America that had been through really troubled times, bankruptcies and so forth, that was inventing what was known then as application software. This was writing general ledger systems, manufacturing systems, order processing systems on mainframe computers. And prior to that, people were doing all this by hand, essentially. And so it was the first world's application software company. We went public in 1981, became the largest software company in the world that no one's probably ever heard of today. And it was later sold to Dun & Bradstreet. And that's really where I realized that I was an entrepreneur, and that my goal was in the life, after having thousands of people work for me at a very young age, kind of being the number two sales executive, that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur, sold pet supplies, and figured that business out during the Depression, because people fed their pets during the Depression as much as they fed their family. So I kind of watched that process being made, and was really, really taken with the whole prospect of starting a business. And, through that, then I went to a company called Continuum in Austin, Texas. I had moved around quite a bit early in my career, and Continuum was a company in the life insurance, property casualty, health software business. And we turned it into an outsourcing business, and took basically a bankrupt business and sold it to Science Corporation for $1.5 billion in a couple years later. And then that's where my life really took a big change. I got a call from Steve Jobs at home. I thought it was one of my buddies from college, so I hung up the phone. It was one of those stories. It actually was Steve Jobs. Called because he knew I understood the software he was building at a company called Next Computer. Next was his gigs in between the two Apple scenarios, and he was building some very clever software to write applications on the internet, kind of version 1.0, using a technology called object-oriented software. I was really a software person. I told him I wasn't interested in the hardware business, but if he wanted to shut that hardware business down, I could be his guy, and had two young children. And it was, kind of moved to the place where I really wanted to see my dreams come true. And from a business standpoint, be a CEO of a technology software business. And so I moved to Silicon Valley. It was a great risk. The company was technically bankrupt, but we were able to build a software company out of the ashes of that. Was then sold to Apple when Steve famously went back to Apple to turn Apple around. And it was the development environment, it's known as WebObjects today, and built all the App Store technology, iTunes, and then the operating system that became the Mac OS and the iOS operating system inside your cell phone today. Mm-hmm. So it was a great way to get introduced to Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is a tough place to come to in that era if you didn't know people or didn't go to Stanford or Berkeley or Caltech, and I didn't know any of those people. So this gave me kind of the boy in the bubble experience. Steve obviously knew lots of very well-known people, and it introduced me in a way that really helped launch my career. So it was an interesting time in my life. I decided that Apple wasn't a fit for me because I've really spent my whole career and life in the enterprise technology business. So then I went on just quickly to run 4 software companies as CEO, 1 public, 3 private. They were all venture capital backed. And little did I know that would be an introduction to the journey that I would do for the next 25 years. But through that process, I met many of the kind of generation 1 and generation 2 venture capital people that were building software and other kinds of businesses. And I was invited by Foundation Capital, who was a small firm at the time. There wasn't as many venture capital firms. There was a few hundred, and they were doing business to business, deep technology investing. And they were looking for somebody with an operating background to go with a lot of the principals and founders of it. It was a small firm organization to help kind of offset, their product and deep technology chops with someone that had run numbers of businesses and could help on the go-to-market side. And I told him I didn't know if I'd be any good at it. I'm not sure why you want me. But it kind of all worked out. I was there for a year, kind of on a, wasn't going to be a fit for them and a fit for me. That I would encourage people to do that if they ever want a career in the venture business. You really need to know the people. It's partnerships very much like a family business, and can be highly dysfunctional, like a family can be. But you really need to get to know the people's strengths and weaknesses, and that turned into a 17-year career. And I was one of the managing partners there. And, we went from a small, kind of $75 million fund to a multi-billion dollars of money under management for hospital, healthcare industry, consumer industry, fintech, crypto. And as the firm became bigger and there became a next generation of partners, I showed up at the meeting one day and said, I think it's time for me to get fired. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, I've been doing this 17 years. No one should do anything for 17 years. We have a whole great next generation set of partners. There's a lot of different interests, and those weren't my interests really. And once again, I was back to managing people and money, not doing what I love to do, which is start companies. My wife said, maybe you should think about, taking some time off. And of course, the next week she came into my office and said, I think you should go back to work. So it's Startups Anonymous. I decided to start another venture capital firm called WestWave Capital 6 years ago. Now we're a firm that's in the emerging manager space, or micro venture capital. Those are fund sizes under 100 million, Joe. Okay. And this was my intention. I felt that the venture industry had kind of lost a bit of its way, a bit of its entrepreneurship. Essentially, what venture should really be about is you making money when your investors make money. And that sounds easy, but when you get a big management firm that has lots of management fees under business, you can hide performance for a long time. Maybe not intentionally, but you get paid a lot of management fees. And whether or not your companies are successful and make money, it takes a decade to figure that out in our business. So we're now raising our 3rd fund. We've funded 71 companies in the SaaS business, robotics business now, which looks like a SaaS business, artificial intelligence, of course, edge-based computing, cloud infrastructure, analytics, and security. Those are the main areas. We're a thesis-driven firm, Joe. So what that means with myself and my investing partners, we think about what's the next 10 or 20 years going to look like in each one of those categories. And we're looking for things that are in those categories that we believe have white spaces where you could build large companies around. And of course, in the end, the venture business is a pretty humbling business. You look back at some of the investments you made and say, why did we fail? And there's usually some classic reasons why you fail. So I'm in a business where I fail more than I succeed, but when I succeed, people think I'm smart, and we have the potential to make a lot of money for our investors and our portfolio companies. So I hope that helps you with a little bit of history.
Yeah.
Got a couple kids,
Wow.
got three grandkids, got a wife who keeps me, on the straight and narrow, who's much smarter than me.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit
No.
of my life story.
Yeah, I
Hopefully.
love it. That's brilliant. Funny, appreciate that because I think it's really important that the guests can really appreciate the caliber of guest on the show right now. What I was really curious about, you mentioned some advice for anyone looking to get into venture capital about who they work with. When you launched WestWave, did you
Yeah.
start with anybody else, and who was that if you did?
Yeah, no, that's a terrific question to ask me because it really is about a partnership and finding people that have a shared vision and passion, could disagree, but in the end, you commit to something when you commit to it. So I was very fortunate to find a young guy early in his career named Gaurav Menglik, who was born in India and went to IIT, did a stint at a master's at Stanford in double E. And early on in his career, he had come to me after a stint at Oracle and VMware and said he wanted to start a company that allowed you to run multiple business applications on any cloud. So you could move it from Amazon to Google. In those days, Amazon was so dominant, even some of the greatest, brightest minds in Silicon Valley, including a lot of my partners, thought that there'd only be one cloud. And I said, well, I can assure you of one thing, there won't be one of anything in our business. That's just not the way that it works. It's a highly competitive business. And so the ability to run on multiple clouds gives the customer and the vendor a lot of freedom to move between clouds. So Gaurav started that company and then built it for 6 years and then sold it to Cisco. It was called Clicker. And I kidded. He was 27 when I met him. And I kidded him. I said, if I ever started another venture capital firm, which I said I would never do in my life, it's too hard. I said, I want you to be my partner. And so there was, 14 years later, he was getting, calls from some of the seminal venture capital firms in the Valley wanted to hire him. And I said, if you really want to be in this business, you ought to come work with me because we can build this together. You're much younger than me. I need somebody that's generationally younger. My goal has always been a firm that could outlast me. I can talk maybe a little bit about some charitable work I do with my brother, but I really do this because it allows me to give back more money to things I'm passionate about beyond just the technology industry. So
Yeah.
that's how it got started. I found a young guy at Stanford who was in the Stanford StartX venture capital program, Rohan Puranik. He had one startup. We all have operating backgrounds. So the genesis of Foundation was operating backgrounds and then learn venture. And that was the same here. People that are deeply technical in engineering or, myself who learned this. I learned this from lots of smart people. They always say, how does a person in sales actually learn all this technology? Well, hang around a bunch of smart people and you can actually look reasonably smart. That's a little bit about how it kind of all came together.
Yeah, I love it. And whilst we're on the advice piece, what other bits of advice would you give to folks looking to start out in the venture capital world? Look, make sure
Yeah,
you
don't
work with the
start out
team.
in the venture capital. I would tell them that people come to me all the time and they say, I want to be a venture capitalist. And I say, no, we need to learn business. Well, there are many different areas of venture capital. So that's not true for everybody. If you take the highest category, like private equity buyout, you can come from lots of different kind of backgrounds. It could be an operating background like me, could be an investment banking background, could even be a legal background because it's really a lot of financial engineering and buying and selling and nations of understanding how to put companies together. But what I do in the early stage venture capital space, if I'm going to have credibility with an entrepreneur, I have to look them in the eye and say, I've done this before. It's hard. It's hard to get your first sales. It's hard to build a product. It's hard to build a team. And so we want people in our firm that have done this, have credibility with entrepreneurs because we're a bit different than most early stage companies. It's not about investing. It's really about having a passion that aligns with an entrepreneur because these take 14, 15 years if they're going to have real success and working with them on every aspect of the business. And it's really kind of gaining their trust. And I always tell entrepreneurs, I work for you 99% of the time. I'm on your team. 1% of the time, I work for all shareholders to make sure that I'm doing my fiduciary job for my investors and for all shareholders in the business. And, this isn't about me being your friend. This is about teaching you how to run and mentor you to build a company. And some entrepreneurs can make that journey from the very beginning to the exit of the company. Very few. You hear all the legendary, famous stories, Scott McNealy, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. Those are far and few and in between. And usually at some point you have to have a CEO that comes in and guides the company through scaling. And that's a really tough hard transition. It can be fraught with all kinds of problems when you do that because they're not as passionate as the founders. So that's how we kind of think about the DNA and culture and working with startups.
Yeah, I love that. Talking of entrepreneurs and the founders, like having done this a long, long time now, what is it you look for when you're like evaluating or assessing founders?
Yeah, they're special people. Sometimes they're not the most balanced people. We have a whole history of entrepreneurs that, people would look in the eye and go, wow, that person's just crazy. You do have to be a little crazy to do this. And there's a fine line between dysfunctional and, a person that just has the grit and the grind and the emotional fortitude to fight through things because it'd be really easy to quit. There are different kinds of founders. There are products. People come from product and engineering backgrounds, people that come from sales backgrounds, marketing backgrounds. And so depending upon the kind of company, we want them to have the domain expertise and experience. It's rare to get just someone out of college that, kind of can make that happen. It does happen. There's kind of two kinds of investments. There's really only two kinds. Most investments are better, faster, cheaper. So if you're looking for an entrepreneur, they've usually been in some other successor generation. I told this story about my partner Gaurav, but his genesis of his idea to move applications between cloud happened at VMware, where he was on a project that got canceled, which was a first generation virtualization company. And so that experience gave him and his co-founder, Tenri Fu, who runs a successful startup called Spectro Cloud now. That's another net generation version of virtualization on Kubernetes. So we either look for those. So there's either better, faster, cheaper, or brave new world. And one of the best examples has always been the iPad. And when Jobs brought out the iPad, everybody go, what the heck are you going to do with that thing? And he had the fortitude and insight that consumption of content was going to be viewed in a different kind of way. And no one knew how big that market was. And those are investments that can tank really quickly, or if they come to fruition, they can be your biggest outcomes. And of course, we look for entrepreneurs that have the fortitude to want to go all the way, so to speak, live the dream, have a chance at an IPO. It's very hard. And I tell founders, every time you do a financing, there's this moment of, should we really dilute our ownership in the company? Can we really get to the next stage? And these things, they're like rockets taking off. They all have stages to them, and you always have to look in the mirror and say, is it still a big market? Is it still unique technology? Can it still generate 70% gross margins because it's a very profitable business to set up a sales and marketing and customer service engine to service? And then can you make 10x like money, which is the theoretical 10x. If you make more than 3x in our business and have more than 20% investor rate of return, you get a chance to raise another funds. Long answer. One of the most important things: no great company without a great CEO, because the CEO recruits the team. And if the CEO isn't of that, you're not going to have a great company.
Speaking of X returns over your career, have there been any that have been like really notable success stories for you?
Yeah, I view this first of all as a team sport. The successes for me aren't me; they're a team. The team is my partnership that gives me the opportunity to invest, and the team on the ground that's doing all the hard work every day. I've been fortunate to have many successes. I think the one that's most endeared to my heart, because it was so hard to do, was a company called Silver Spring Networks. And the vision behind the company was, how do we connect homes and businesses to the utility over the internet? And back in those days, this was 15, 20 years ago now, the utilities didn't believe the internet could scale. And it was such an inefficient business. Somebody would come and turn on your meter, turn off your meter. We have fires. Why can't they just turn off the grid wirelessly? I mean, other people can do these. The technology exists. And so the fortitude of the team, there were many disappointing moments where the product didn't work. It didn't scale, and there were really no other big investors. And so this was when I was at Foundation Capital. And so we had the fortitude as a partnership to continue to back the company when no one else would. Later on, Al Gore's firm came in, Kleiner Perkins came in, John Doerr came in, as we were kind of scaling and growing the company. And it wasn't, the company was worth $1 billion. At one point went public. I got sold to another kind of roll-up company in that space called Itron. but watching that whole experience happen, watching the disappointment of the product just doesn't work. In order for these things to work, they had to have 6, 9 levels of service, and these were multi-$100 million contracts over a decade. And the people that bought from the company bet their jobs, including the president and CEOs of these large utilities. And because it was a regulated business, the regulators had to approve the money for the utilities, because us, the ratepayers, pay for everything in the end of these expenses to do this. And they didn't, they were mostly lawyers and investment bankers that were on these regulatory boards. They didn't understand what technology was all about. So it was a chance to kind of use networking and technology and the internet that we knew existed. There was a lot of security involved in this, a lot of analytics, as you can imagine, and kind of led to this revolution of solar. Now came into your home. It could be networked back to the grid. Electric cars could be connected, and so it was a fun ride with lots of moments of like, probably lose my job over this thing, but we stuck it out and got through it. And it's the world's leading, internet technology for utilities.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess on the flip side of that, you've probably had a couple of misses as well, where you've met a
Big
founder
time.
past and then they've blown. So it's one of those, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, one of my misses that I don't regret doing, but in hindsight, I look back and go, why did I do it? We built a company that was in the controlled atmosphere business for the food supply chain.
Right.
And what I didn't know about the food supply chain was basically everything. When you're trying to use ozone, we were trying to use ozone in shipping containers, across the ocean. Every fruit, grape, vegetable, it's like a human being has its own way of being conditioned to a controlled atmosphere like environment. People think of ozone as this whole in the sky. Also, ozone's a miracle. I mean, you get a bottle of water, you hear that when you open it. That's ozone. So ozone used effectively, which is really our real intellectual property, was a key breakthrough. And we could do it for some fruits and vegetables, and would last, something that was an apple could last now years versus months. A banana that lasts a week could last months. And so the food waste was tremendous in this business. But I didn't really understand how shippers, growers, packers, distributors, retailers work in the food supply business. They do a lot of this. They blame each other for the problems versus trying to fix the problem. And of course, we got caught up in that problem because it's just a complex sale. It would take forever to do. So, by the time we had got the technology kind of dialed in, we had run through, too much money and too much time. And no one's really ever solved the problem. So you see a lot of climate in and around. This was the genesis of the clean tech industry, which I kind of never believed there was such an industry, because it was really technology into the supply side, the demand side of the business. So I didn't want to compete against Mobile or Shell or any of those kind of companies. So
it's funny, isn't it? Yeah, you have your wins, you have your misses. I hear that. Talking a little bit more about WestWave in terms of check sizes, stage. Talk to me a little bit more about WestWave and the investments.
Yeah, so we've had 3 funds. Our first fund was 33 million, second fund's 52, and our third fund we're raising now. And I got to be careful what I say about that. It'll be a little bit bigger. So with each progression, we started originally with the firm when it was just myself, and then my partner Rohan joined pretty quickly after. The goal was to be kind of ownership agnostic and write check sizes of $500,000. And we're in the pre-seed seed business. So the pre-seed business is kind of rounds between 1 and 3 million. These are getting the businesses off the ground. And then it's preceded by seed, which is a $5 or $6 million round. And then there's the Series A rounds now that are 15 million. So when I got into foundation capital, Series A was 5 million. But what became, there can be too much capital too early for a company to ruin it, and it's too dilutive. So that's how we kind of got through the first fund. The first fund has a 65% we paid back distribution to paid in capital in the first few years of the fund. That's kind of unheard of. This was before the last 3 years where we had a lot of lull in the economy and market, and venture was slower. And then we've started 71 companies, and we've sold 14 companies, mostly through M&A. There's one company that went public. It was a robot in the fruit and vegetable picking business. That was a very successful robot to pick cherries and green peppers and a vertically integrated greenhouse. And then so fund two was to, we now want to take board seats and some more ownership. So we write $1 million check to get started. We do something kind of unique in our business. We reserve $1 for every dollar we invest. So if there's $1 million going in, think about it, in our poker hand, we have $1 million left in the piggy bank.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives us the capacity to back our winners harder. And the other tenet of the firm is if we don't think every stage of the investment cycle has a 10x kind of opportunity, because you get into the B and C rounds, they're looking for 3 to 5x in 3 to 5 years. The same for kind of private equity, kind of buyouts. That's not our business. Our goal is to recruit other Series A, B, C growth firms to take those rounds up. So now we have more ownership. Our ownership kind of averages around 8 or 9% now. And we're writing larger check sizes where the firm's on about 12 boards now. And then we still write small checks. We write checks as little as 250K. And then for fund three, the goal would be to be even a little bolder because we have the resources and team now to sit on boards and be, effective for all the companies. And whether we write a check for $1 or $1 million, we do the same amount of hard work, whether they're on the board or not on the board. We want the reputation brand of the firm to really know that we're there to really help entrepreneurs through this. And so 75% of the projects that we invest in come in organically. Our largest practice by a few percent is probably in the security related business. I've been doing this long enough that I remember 10 years of nobody would fund a security company. Now cybersecurity, because of the attack patterns and what can take place, is a larger business than it's ever been. And I don't see that slowing down anytime in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
The bad guys are still hacking pretty regularly.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But when you talk more about entrepreneurs and founders, do you find yourself giving the same advice, or what advice do you give to typically to founders?
Yeah, it kind of comes in stages. And one thing to learn when you're a venture person is how to talk with entrepreneurs. Talking is the benefit is really listening, not talking. So each founder requires something different and unique that they're working on. And so when we see things like, first time CEO, should we go get an outside independent board member that's been a successful CEO to mentor that person? I can do much of that mentoring, but I feel it's more effective not coming from the investor day to day. They need some kind of safe zone where they can talk about things that might be pretty basic and, how they think about their team and hiring people and firing people and giving people raises and when to hire people. So, there's just various different, how do you bring on your first marketing person, your first salesperson? If they come from a technical background, they typically managing engineering, and sometimes they have trouble letting go. And it's, they can't be the CEO and then run engineering all the time. So it's all about different conversations at different phases. And each personality is, they're human. They're uniquely different. And so you have to surround them with a set of venture people and partners that can really help them on that journey.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, look, Bunny, we could probably talk for hours. And I know we're plowing through the time pretty quickly. Well, what's the future for you, mate? The future for WestWave? I know also you do quite a lot outside of your sort of professional day to day as well.
Yeah. So, the future of WestWave looks terrific for us. We believe, and I strongly believe, that investing into a downturn, when the economy's been slow, inflation was high, interest rates were high, a lot of venture people stop investing. And it's been proven, if you look at the last 4 downturns, if you continue to invest while the business is slow, those wind up being, it's like a wine. Those are the best vintages. And you can go back to the internet, 2000, 2002, those that kept investing, even though the internet bubble kind of blew things up here in Silicon Valley, the real investors continue to invest through that. So, our future, we really believe that everything that I described, what we do, is going to get reinvented. If you build a SaaS application today, you wouldn't build it so somebody had to do data entry and had to create unique workflows. The AI engine can do that for you today. We have a company that does that for QuickBooks for small businesses now. And so the timing of this, I think we got really lucky because we've been doing machine learning and AI since the very beginning of the company. So the technology is all built, included in that. Now, when generative AI came along, it's kind of the cherry on top of the ice cream, so to speak. And so we're fortunate that we can really take advantage of this wave. And I just think it's a great business to be in. Innovation's never going to stop. Look at what's going on at space. as an example. Quantum computing at some point will be on the way. So that our industry continues to reinvent itself. And personally, for me, it's about seeing the firm continue to be a great firm and grow and mentor the team to successfully, run this without me at some point, because you don't have a real business unless your business can be run by other people. We're making lots of great strides in doing that. And then, one of my personal passions, my brother started a charity in Kenya. My brother is a retired school teacher from Chicago area, to get kids high school scholarships in Kenya. It's a very difficult place to do it. He started out with the dream of giving one kid a scholarship for $3,500. You can send the kid to school for 3-4 years, boarding school, food. This is a miracle for these kids. And half had to be girls, half to be boys. It was started in a small village in Dago, Kenya, near the Tanzania border, that was very impoverished and had, water, power, electricity, and now has solar. There's some homes going up there. It has running water. We're about to get close to 300 kids through high school now, half are boys, half girls. No girl had really ever went to high school there and had a career. We have our first young lady that came to the United States on a full ride scholarship to Elmhurst University.
Oh, wow.
We've done a documentary about, you can see it on the Weiss Scholarship Foundation. There's a preview of it, and she wants to be a doctor, and she's in her 3rd year there now. And that's a program we hadn't planned on starting. So we have a tailoring school there now. We have a vocational school. Many kids don't get the chance to go to college. We have about 30 kids in universities now, but the vocational school is great. You want to be a bricklayer, an electrician, plumber. They have a huge shortage of these skills. It's a really emerging country. Kenya, wonderful people, and it's a great honor to help them. So I've been on the board now for probably 10 years. We went and lived in a mud hut earlier days to feel the real experience of what it was like and what it's like to eat once a day, and really live the life that people. They're amazing human beings, and where you were born in the world matters. It's an honor to help him. It's one of the things that motivate. I'm really proud of him. He's one of my heroes now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Bunny, man, you're a great dude, great guy. Your brother, obviously, that's pretty impressive. So would love to meet him one day if possible. Look forward to helping you with that charity as well. Absolutely a commitment from us is that we'll help with that. And I just want to say thanks again for coming on the show, telling a little bit more about WestWave, your journey, what you're up to, and the future. So, man, we could have talked for hours, but thanks for coming on.
It's great. Thanks for your time today, and appreciate your listeners listening.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website, www.aspironsearch.com.